on whose side do you belong, whose position holds the strongest for you? And there are those who are asking the question, what is the significance or the political quota of former President Obasanjo's endorsement of the Labour Party's presidential candidate? Joining us this morning is Dr. Eunice Atanko, who is Chief Spokesperson for Lagos Labour Party Presidential Campaign Council. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hopefully other people will join us. But for now, as my colleague asked before we came on it, what's that question you asked him again?
I asked a number of questions.
That, you know, they must be Bugain. Is that what you
right now, yes, the Labour Party. It must be in celebratory mood.
Yeah, we are, actually. But before I really give my thoughts to the letter, I just want to use this opportunity to wish Nigerians a happy new year. And I tagged it actually as saying why we are fighting hard for the soul of Nigeria, for a better and an egalitarian society. I wish to use this opportunity to wish them an obediently and useful 2023, with a lot of challenges, which is captured by the letter of former President Olusegun Okikiola Matthew Ogumboye Aremu Obasanjo. Now, what really caught my attention as regard to the letter was, let me just digress and say, I want to deal with that letter in three aspects. One, the issue of where we are at the moment, and then the warning that was within that letter, and the solution in which he preferred. One, the attention that really got me going was on the fact that the letter was addressed directly to the Nigerian people, but specifically to the Nigerian youth. For a very long time, the Nigerian youth have been neglected, and nobody is actually looking at their own. But here, we have now seen the force and the determination of the Nigerian youth. And then he went ahead and said in paragraph 2, he said, the 7.5 years has been challenging and eventful, with the fact that we have moved from fry pan to fire. And at the same time, he said, from the top to now the lowest part of the valley. And most interestingly, he also said that he noticed that most of the candidates are trying to bring us to some of the things that he has done as a president. And then they are using the indices of saying they are bringing him back to 1999 to 2007 when he started. But he's also referring that the problem is more than that, because at the time he was in office, he was brought in to solve a problem. So we need to do something more dynamic. Now, the warning here is this: the danger of losing this country to that particular challenges of 1999 and to present day situation. But one interesting part of it in providing his own solution, he looked at the area of what he called TVCP.
Track record of vision,
exactly,
and ability to perform.
Exactly.
But can you rule that out, you know, of the other candidates to possess, you know, for them to be able to also deliver? They're equally competent.
Yes, no. And now he questioned the issue of competency as a word in which you use in trying to allude to a find of a capacity of person to. He mentioned it very clearly. So he questioned the issue of competency, because some will use it as a kind of some of the things that they have been able to do which have not produced results. But now, looking at that particular 4-dimension and factor that he mentioned, the track record is something that you must have, even when you allude to the fact that some of them may have. What are their track record? In our own case, we have a presidential candidate. I mean, how can you imagine that you become an IDP in your own country?
Well, I know that, you know, everyone would want to speak about that one, but I think a number of people may also want to join in on this conversation this morning. Anthony Hilebo is also joining in this conversation. He is a member of the Strategic Communication Directorate of the People's Democratic Party's presidential campaign. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mr. Hilebo.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, most certainly, it would seem like, as far as the former President Obasanjo is concerned, even his political alma mater, the PDP, doesn't have the kind of candidate that should take Nigeria to Uhuru.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And first of all, before I go on, I must wish Nigerians a very happy new year. And here's wishing for the best to happen to Nigeria, not the worst. The worst being what former President Olusegun Obasanjo described in his commentary. But I'll be quick to say and admit that I'm a personal friend of General Obasanjo. I'm a fan. I admire him a lot. But I'm also a very pragmatic fan. I'm objective. I know where he has made some calls that didn't pattern out well for Nigerians, particularly in 2014. We remember that he wrote these letters against then President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, and he's now complaining 7.5 years later that we are going from frying pan to fire. I would suggest that someone that put us in the frying pan will sit this one out and allow the Nigerians to make a choice instead of foisting a subjective opinion on Nigerians. I would like for him to have been an elder statesman, and he's talking about experience and capacity. And I read the letter where he said the situation and the scenarios are quite different. I beg to disagree respectfully with the general. I beg to respectfully disagree because when you look at 1999 to 2007, the scenarios are similar. And when you want to deal with an issue such as the Nigerian malady that we face today, you must bring in experience, you must bring in capacity. President Obasanjo has, in time past, and possibly aired on this same channel's television, praised Atiku Abubakar for handling the economy while he was going around the world trying to repair the image of Nigeria. There's a recent article on the 1st of January in This Day newspaper where Atiku explains how they ran government and how he was able to bring in experts like Bode Augusto, who he got to run on the government based on his affinity for Nigeria, his love for the country, and without even commensurate pay, he agreed to work for the government of Obasanjo. Same thing with people like Soludo, the eggheads that we had in the Obasanjo government. And this was after an intense 9-month period of developing an economic blueprint. Now, you wouldn't say Nigeria is in that same situation and you don't want to use it. Maybe for some reason. I've had extensive conversations with the general. And for me, I think his heart is in a good place. He has the best interest of Nigeria at heart. But sometimes some decisions he has made or on who to support have been driven, especially when you even consider...
Just 1 second. Just 1 second. Just before we take a break. But it's not the first time, for instance, that he's saying that your principal, your candidate, as far as he's concerned, he's never going to support him for president. So one would say that he's been consistent as far as that one is concerned, wouldn't you say?
Well, when you talk about consistency, in 2019, he supported our candidate, His Excellency, his former Vice President, Atiku Abubakar. He supported him fully. But I'll tell you a backstory that people hardly know. People don't even know that he was the one that recommended his present candidate of choice to Atiku Abubakar as a condition for supporting him in 2019. That was the plan. That was have these two people run on a platform so that you can mentor him, and by the time he comes of age,
we'll allow just 1 second. We'll allow Mr. former President Obasanjo to come and say whether what he said and what he means are two different things when you made that comment. But let me quickly bring in Mr. Bamigbeton, his spokesperson, the Tinubu-Shetima Presidential Campaign Council. Thanks for joining us this morning. Well, you heard you read in that release, the letter to Nigerians by former President Obasanjo, that every one of the candidates vying for office of the president, they claim to be his mentee, and he wouldn't argue with that, but that he prefers the candidate of the party over and above any other, including your principal. What's your take?
Well, you know, of course, that it would be wrong for him to claim that Ashwani Bola Ahmed Tinubu is one of his mentees. No, that will not be correct, because what has happened in Nigerian history from 1999 to 2007 was not a relationship between a lord and a mentee. It was a case of two people testing the federal principle between themselves. Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu was governor of Lagos State, and he went to court against Obasanjo's government on many infractions of the federal government against the state. That is not a relationship of mentorship or whatever. And for us, Obasanjo's values from day one was that of a dictator, who tried to muzzle himself in, who tried to undermine the power of the state, who tried to undermine federalism in the country. So that's not the relationship of a mentor and a mentee. That's number one. Number two, basically, is that the former president of Federal Republic of Nigeria certainly has a role to play in exercising his fundamental human rights to take a position. We always knew since March, even long before that he had his eyes and was the chief strategist of the OBI campaign. So we are not at all shocked at all or surprised by this New Year message. We knew it was going to come, and we were fully prepared for it. And we are saying that any self-respecting presidential candidate who has read what President Obasanjo wrote should not even be proud to step further into this game. For someone to be telling you that you must have a threat, you are a needle who must have a threat. You are somebody who was going to be who will be pulling your hairs. I mean, those are very deprecating way for somebody who wants to be who wants to put the president in place. That's an errand board presidency that she's trying to create, and we know that has been its history, trying to impose, trying to hoist, trying to manipulate, and we are sure that he has seen the handwriting on the wall, in the past about his capacity to convert these words into action. We know that he will not win even his polling booth in Ogun State. Yeah. So we are not bothered about some of these things.
And Mr. Bankbeton, that's where I'd like to come in. You say he's not going to win a polling booth in his home state, and that's the reason this support has no electoral value whatsoever. But if it does not, why did your candidates go visiting him at the time of campaign, seeking his support for presidency? And at that time, many Nigerians were surprised that former President Obasanjo and your candidates can be seen in the same room in the first place, going by their relationship in 2007.
That is what we call diplomacy with elder statesmen. It's a normal diplomatic move that will show that you are not how to fight anybody. But it does not mean that you do not know the capacity of the person you are going to visit. You understand?
But why can't that diplomacy color the language in response to this open declaration of his support for the candidate of the Labour Party?
That's what we are saying, that he has a fundamental human right to choose whoever he wants to support. We cannot disagree with him on that, But we can also tell you that as politicians who are grassroots, who have been in this field for some time, we also know the capacity of everybody. And we are saying that this tendency, this announcement of a judge, of a verdict, is totally not correct, because it is deceptive. Because you have been the chief strategist of this person for over 2 years. We always knew that.
No, the point is, Mr. Bankbeton, the point is declaring his support of having no electoral value is not diplomacy.
That's your opinion. I don't agree with you. I do not agree with you. I'm talking facts, as demonstrated. Even when he contested in 1999, he didn't have the support of his base. And you know that tendentiously, APC has always won that stage, essentially, over time, So what I'm just saying is basically is that we recognize the right of former President Olusegun Obasanjo to choose the candidates he wants to support. But we are also saying that much of what is said on that occasion, if you look at it very, very well, they don't even give Mr. Peter Obi any modicum of respect. The manner in which he described Mr. Peter Obi, if you were in his shoes, would not be something that you could take to the bank. We don't even think that was fair to the man. But we also know that some of the comments that he made, about insecurity, the highest law officer of the Federation, Balagi, died in the government he served. He has not done anything to reverse that. or to even exploit or to even get it. He has not shown any interest in pursuing the case. So many cases like that. So
all right, Mr. Bangbeton, we must take a break now. The jury is out on, whether that open declaration for the candidate of the Labour Party confers respect on him or not. We must take a break now, and we'll return to continue this conversation. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. We're still x-raying former President Olusegun Obasanjo's letter to Nigerians declaring support for the presidential candidate of the Labour Party. And we have with us Mr. Kehinde Bangbeton representing the APC, and also we have Mr. Yunusa Tanku here in the Lagos studio. We also have Mr. Ehilebo of the PDP who joined us via Zoom. Mr. Yunusa, I imagine you would want to respond to some of the views expressed by Mr. Bangbeton on the declaration of former president's support for your candidate.
The position of former president is very, very clear. Being a leader who has presided over this country, he has an ample opportunity to know virtually almost everybody who has been with him one way or the other. Even at a distance, he can easily measure you with your capacity and your strength and what you have done over the years. And he mentioned it very, very clear, which he alluded to that particular position of his as regard to the track record and vision, character, and then the issue of physical attribute. Now, when he mentioned those particular attributes, he scaled all of the candidates, and he looked at them. Who has one of the most track record? He looked at the track record of Peter Obi and the rest of the candidates. And you all have it on the air. It's in the public domain. As regards to some of the track record of these past leaders who have, some of them, been engaged in either some of drug or corruption, as the case may be. Now, he looked at the track record of Obi, which has in Anambra State, in a micro situation, in terms of security, he scored high. In terms of infrastructure, he scored high. In terms of accountability, he scored high. In terms of compassion to the people, he scored high. From his own assessment as a former leader, which he used as a yardstick. Now, when you talk about the issue of character, a man is very open. And in fact, there is this particular comical statement vision you will see. They use all the microscope trying to look for any issue about Obi. They couldn't find anything. Rather, what they find is that the man has been able to leave money, 75 billion naira, in the coffers of Anambra, and it was confirmed by the succeeding governor, who said he used that particular money to build the airport. So there was no ambiguity in that. And with regard to the issue of vision, the man has looked at Peter Obi and said the man having vision in trying to take us out of the wood, based on the fact that he's talking about from consumption to production, which we lack, because most of the situation we find ourselves is that Nigeria is just heavily dependent on what he can bring into the country. But we're thinking about something that we can. He looked at the area land of Nigeria in the part of this country and said, look, let's turn every 774 local government into a production center. This will give employment, it gives room for security. It makes sure that everybody is economically empowered. This is what we need, and give opportunity for employment. When you talk about physical attribute, the man is 61 years old compared to people who are doctored age of 70 to 80. We just moved out of the issue of the Yaradua. May his soul rest in peace.
How do you know their ages were doctored?
Well, it's public domain. I didn't say it because most of the things that they gave to alluded to their age mean. We are confirming the issue of even the court case in the United States, where an age position of a candidate signified at that time, and then we have issue when you talk about your own daughter and your own self having almost at par age. So these are public domain.
Are you saying then that the statement he made at Chatham House in London, where he gave his own date of birth, are you saying it's untrue?
But the question I want to ask is, did he actually give the date? He didn't.
Oh, really?
He didn't. He didn't. He was asked the question. He didn't.
You may want to go and, watch that video again, because he gave a specific date.
He gave a specific date
of his own birth. So if you find that to be correct, would you then say that he's
these are records that are in public domain. Even when you mention your age, when you do an investigation, you can easily find that there are variants in terms of age.
Okay. Well, Mr. Ehilero, you've been on this conversation for a little bit. So one is wondering, how should the Nigerian listening and watching now, going by some of the things that you've heard Dr. Tanko say, and the things contained, the facts contained in the open letter to Nigerians by former President Obasanjo, what should they be looking at as an alternative view from what former President Obasanjo said?
So first of all, I'm going to query some of the decisions my big Oga, my father, Obasanjo, has made, particularly with his nomination of the DG to the Peter Obi campaign, and how much he didn't do his homework, knowing that Doyin Okupe was under trial and may likely be convicted. That was a huge embarrassment for the Obi campaign and showed lack of critical thinking and research in terms of doing the background checks that needed to be done. Of course, he had this knowledge. So that choice just showed that, as well as the choice he's making now, is not a choice that Nigerians must look at. And when my brother in the studio tells you consumption to production, you have to look at the individual in particular. Peter Obi is not a he's the consumption person. His greatest business is importation. So he's one of the people who that imports to Nigeria. He's one of the highest importers to Nigeria. So he's a consumption person. He's not a production person, like my principal, His Excellency Atiku Abubakar, who is a core production person in Faro, Prime Industries. These are companies that produce here in Nigeria and export, if possible. Not people who import to us and come and tell us consumption to production. That for me is a misnomer and a misapplication of principles. Well, let's go back to particularly, I wouldn't throw diatribes at the eminent personality of former President Obasanjo. However, I have a strong, very strong opposition to anybody who would seem to want to control the president of Nigeria, either by a thread or a needle or by pulling his ears. We want an independent president. We want a president that can take decisions and own his time in government. Not someone, that particular part of that letter threw me off. It didn't sound like again, it's kind of reminds us of what happened prior to 2015, the change that he also wrote a letter to instigate Nigerians to change Jonathan because he felt he was no longer in control of Jonathan. And then he went against his preferred candidate that he brought upon the evil, the woe that he has brought upon Nigeria. I'm quite glad that he took his time to elucidate very well on the APC candidate and why Emilokon is not just what Nigeria needs right now. But we must remember that this is the same person that put us in this position. This is what I hold him accountable for. I asked my father, I'll tell him, look, you put us in this position in 2000, but why now should we listen to you again?
Okay.
Why now should we listen to you again?
Okay. We're winding down, Mr. Hilabod. Let me take the opinion of Mr. Bangbeton. You heard some of the comments made by Dr. Tanko, especially about, the statements, from former President Obasanjo, particularly speaking to what he called TVCP, track record, vision, character, and physical and mental capability. And of course, there are many who cut out short clips, videos from the campaign of your principal, questioning whether or not he has the physical soundness that is required to lead Nigeria. How do you respond, particularly in the light of the speech by former President Obasanjo?
Well, in the first place, our candidate, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has demonstrated viability, and vibrancy. He has moved across the country from one place to the other, holding rallies and explaining the manifesto of our party to the Nigerian people. That in itself shows somebody who has a lot of physical fitness to go through the rigor of running the presidency. And we will always insist that the role that President Olusegun Obasanjo is trying to play is basically to impose an option on Nigerian people. And our own position basically is that as Democrats, as grassroots politicians who have served the Nigerian people and who rely on our track record in service as the major basis for recommending us to proceed to the presidency, we know that Nigerian people will be on our side and we will defeat the retired general who is trying to determine the fate of Nigerians forever.
Okay, let's wind down with this question for each one of you, gentlemen. Of what electoral value is the endorsement of former President Obasanjo or any opinion leader at that? I'll start with you, Mr. Bangbeton.
He has the import of this basically is that it should have no electoral value. We know the capacity, we know the source, we know that this project he has been working on for like 2-3 years, and we know it was going to blow up in the space.
Okay.
We know that.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Hilebo, your take on that question.
It's interesting that you are asking the electoral value of someone who's just got one vote and whose opinion is not going to be heard in my village in Igwebe and Igbiki Ward 1. Nobody's going to know what Obasanjo says or what he has said, and it's not going to sway any votes. He is an opinion leader. He's entitled to his opinion. Is respected. But then the pragmatic choice for Nigerians will be who can get us out of this position, who has done it before. And he referred to that in his letter. That
okay,
yes,
all right. We're winding down, Mr. Hilebo. I think we hear you. We hear you loud and clear.
That the experience is enough and can take them to promise.
All right, thank you. Well, Dr. Tanko.
How can you explain the fact that if he doesn't have an electoral value, everybody's rushing to see him? You cannot, there's no correlation. The fact that is that he's a former head of state. In fact, I want to use this opportunity to use him as a point of contact to all of our statements. Nigeria is in a dire need of solution, and he has preferred one. And then he should call on all of his colleagues, all of them, to join hands with him so that they can tell these other people that, look, Nigeria needs a more stronger and viable and capable leader in Peter Gregory Obi and Deti Baba Ahmed. And with regard to the issue of production to consumption, let me clearly say, would you have preferred a tax collector to somebody who has invested? Okay. This is somebody who have learned
I guess we'll have to
wait
and see,
and
gentlemen.
You cannot compare them together.
We have to thank you very much for being here this morning. Dr. Yunusa Tanko is the chief spokesperson for the Labour Party Presidential Campaign Council, as well as Anthony Ehilebo, who is a member Strategic Communication Directorate, PDP Presidential Campaign, as well as Kehinde Bangbeton, spokesperson, Tinubu Shatima Presidential Campaign Council. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, and God bless Nigeria.
Yes.